So imagine a really sprawling, like incredibly opulent mansion.
Okay.
Dozens of rooms, sprawling wings, high ceilings, the works. But there's this massive architectural flaw.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there is only one really incredibly narrow hallway connecting the bedrooms on one side of the house to the kitchen on the other.
Right.
So if you want to eat, if you need fuel to keep going, you have to walk down that specific hallway.
Yeah.
And whoever happens to control that little corridor essentially controls the entire house.
No matter who holds the deed.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can have the master suite and the most expensive furniture, but if someone is standing in that hallway and you can't get to the pantry, well, your situation becomes existential very quickly.
Right. And today we are taking a deep dive into the real world equivalent of that hallway. I'm your host, and I'm here with our expert to analyze a strategic brief we received titled The Malacca Strait India Russ's Strategic Sentinel.
Glad to be here.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how a seemingly insignificant geographical bottleneck practically dictates the global balance of power.
Yeah.
And really why plain old geography can still outmaneuver modern military technology.
It really changes your perspective.
Yeah.
Looking past the political borders we're used to seeing on a map and focusing on the physical realities of the globe, it completely changes how you view national security.
Oh, absolutely.
And the Malacca Strait is like the perfect case study for this.
So let's orient ourselves before we get into the heavy strategy stuff. The Malacca Strait is a stretch of water between the Malay Peninsula and the Indonesian island of Sumatra.
Right.
It is the primary maritime highway connecting the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea. And honestly, on a map, it just looks like a geographical afterthought, a tiny little crack between land masses.
Yeah, but at its narrowest point, which is called the Phillips Channel, it is only about 1.5 miles wide.
Wow, 1.5 miles.
Yeah, it's tiny. But the volume of traffic moving through that 1.5-mile gap is staggering. I mean, a massive percentage of the world's commercial trade, and more importantly, millions of barrels of oil every single day have to funnel through this specific Southeast Asian waterway.
Right, and that energy is coming straight from the Middle East, moving east to power these huge manufacturing centers in Asia, like Japan, South Korea, and China. They rely almost entirely on this route to keep their factories running and their cities lit.
And whenever you have a critical global dependency like that, you inherently have a critical global vulnerability.
Yeah.
In naval strategy, this is the textbook definition of a choke point. The consequences of anything happening in that 1.5-mile gap, they extend across the entire planet.
So if you are a superpower, relying on a 1.5-mile gap for your economic survival has to be terrifying.
Oh yeah, absolutely terrifying.
And this is exactly what sparked the concept of China's Malacca dilemma. Because Beijing built an economic juggernaut, right? But that juggernaut requires astronomical quantities of imported energy and raw materials.
Almost all of which travel through this singular maritime gateway. What's fascinating here is that former Chinese President Hu Jintao actually coined that exact term back in 2003.
Really?
Yeah, they call it the Malacca Dilemma. Beijing understands their geography extremely well.
Right.
The dilemma is that their economic lifeline is entirely exposed to a maritime route they do not control and really can't easily defend given its distance from their mainland coast.
Okay, let's unpack this, though. Because if China is so dependent on this route, and they're hyper-aware of this vulnerability, why couldn't they just, escort their super tankers through the strait? I mean, they've spent the last 2 decades building one of the largest navies on the planet.
Right.
So if their supply routes are threatened in a conflict, couldn't they just brute force their way through and ignore anyone trying to pressure them?
Well, brute force in naval logistics requires forward operating bases. And China simply doesn't have them in the Indian Ocean.
Oh, I see.
Escorting a fleet of supertankers thousands of miles away from your home ports, through a narrow congested waterway surrounded by other sovereign nations, it is a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The strategic concern for Beijing isn't just about an adversary physically dropping a gate across the water and blocking ships.
Right, because modern conflict isn't a cartoon. You don't just build a dam across the ocean.
Exactly. Strategic vulnerability rarely requires an opponent to physically close the route. The mere possibility of a disruption, or even the threat of harassment and delayed shipping, is enough to alter Beijing's entire strategic calculus.
So the anxiety itself is a weapon.
Yes. If a conflict breaks out, the uncertainty of what might happen to their energy supply forces them to act defensively.
It forces you to always look over your shoulder. Like, even if no one has locked the hallway to the Titian yet, The knowledge that someone could dictate your access to food completely changes your behavior.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So if this strait is China's greatest geographical vulnerability, who is holding the keys to the hallway?
We'll shift your focus just slightly west of the Malacca Strait.
Yeah.
And you run directly into India's geography, specifically the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Okay, so enter India. Now, these islands are fascinating because they aren't hugging the coast of mainland India.
No, not at all.
They are a chain of over 500 islands extending deep into the eastern Indian Ocean. They are actually significantly closer to Southeast Asia and the Malacca Strait than they are to the Indian mainland.
And that geographical quirk serves as a massive strategic trump card, because naval power is heavily dependent on where your ships and aircraft can sustainably operate.
Not just how many you have.
Right, exactly. The Andaman and Nicobar chain gives India a permanent, unsinkable forward operating base right at the mouth of the Maritime route connecting the Indian Ocean to East Asia.
And there is a specific detail from the text here, a feature called the 6-degree channel. It's located just south of this island chain. And the ocean depth and the massive draft of modern supertankers, these very large crude carriers that need incredibly deep water to sail safely, it essentially forces commercial traffic to pass through this specific channel.
Right, because the physical bathymetry of the ocean floor dictates the route.
Right.
Ships can't just fan out across the entire ocean. They have to follow the deep water trenches.
Right.
And the 6-degree channel places all of that traffic directly under India's geographical footprint.
So what does this all mean in practice? What does India actually do with this real estate? Are they just sitting on the beach with binoculars acting like a global crossing guard? Or is there real tactical teeth here?
Oh, there is definitely teeth. It's all about maritime domain awareness, or MDA.
Okay.
Which is the holy grail of modern naval strategy. It is far beyond binoculars.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
We are talking about a fused, multi-layered information network. India operates long-range maritime patrol aircraft like the P-8I Poseidon out of these islands. And these aircraft drop sonobuoys to listen for submarines. You layer that with coastal radar networks, satellite surveillance, surface ships on patrol, and potentially seabed acoustic sensors.
Wow, so it's an entire web of sensors talking to each other to create a real-time, high-definition picture of the ocean.
Exactly. A commander sitting in New Delhi can look at a screen and know the name, heading, speed, and cargo of nearly every vessel approaching the Malacca Strait.
That's incredible.
And a crisis, the country that sees the maritime environment most clearly can make the fastest, most effective decisions. So the power isn't just in possessing the islands, it's in the ability to process and act on the massive amount of intelligence those islands collect.
Which naturally leads to some incredibly sensational assumptions in the geopolitical commentary space. Because if India has this high-definition picture of everything moving toward the strait, the immediate leap in logic is that India could just blockade China.
Oh yeah, you hear that all the time.
Right, people assume India could just park a couple of destroyers across the channel and starve the Chinese economy overnight.
And this raises an important question about how modern war actually works, because that oversimplification completely ignores how international trade and global finance function. War is not a board game.
Right.
The idea of a clean, simple blockade of the Malacca Strait is largely a fantasy.
Okay, let's play that out, because it sounds good on paper until you look at the mechanics. If India tries to stop a ship headed to China, how do they even know whose ship it is?
That is the first massive hurdle. Commercial shipping is an incredibly tangled web. A tanker might be carrying Saudi Arabian oil destined for a port in China.
Right.
But the ship itself might be owned by a Greek shipping magnate.
Oh, wow.
Flagged in Panama, crewed by Filipino sailors, and insured by a syndicate in London.
So who are you actually attacking in that scenario? Oh, let me rephrase that. You are simultaneously antagonizing 5 different sovereign nations and the global financial system just to stop one shipment of oil.
Furthermore, you cannot enforce a blockade without severely impacting neutral states. I mean, the Malacca Strait is surrounded by Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore.
Yeah.
These are sovereign nations whose economies rely on that strait remaining open. Conducting military interdiction operations in their front yard would cause immediate diplomatic blowback from the entire ASEAN bloc.
Not to mention, stopping all commercial shipping would devastate the global economy, which includes India's own economy.
Right.
And China wouldn't just sit idly by. They would deploy military countermeasures, cyber attacks, or escalate along the Himalayan land border they share with India.
Plus, China is developing alternative routes. They aren't as efficient, but they do exist. They can route ships through the Sunda or Lombok Straits further south in Indonesia.
Okay.
It takes longer and costs more fuel, but it prevents total starvation. A blunt force blockade is a wildly unpredictable instrument that causes massive collateral damage.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if a blockade is a myth, what is the actual point of all this surveillance? If the goal isn't to play blockade, what is India doing?
The true strategic advantage is the ability to observe, influence, deter, and respond. It is the concept of a fleet in being. India doesn't need to control every single ship passing through Southeast Asia to wield immense leverage. The objective is to possess such comprehensive maritime awareness and credible striking power that any major adversary operating in the Indo-Pacific must factor India into their plans.
I see. So it's not about locking the hallway. It's like a police cruiser parked on the median of a highway.
Exactly.
The officer doesn't actually have to pull anyone over. Just the presence of that cruiser sitting in full view with its radar gun forces everyone on the highway to tap their brakes and change their behavior. You alter the entire flow of traffic without ever turning on the sirens.
That is a much more mature application of maritime power. India sits squarely at the intersection of two vital strategic theaters. To the west, you have the Arabian Sea and the Persian Gulf, the energy producers.
Yeah.
And to the east, the manufacturing centers of East Asia. India occupies the permanent central position between the fuel and the factory.
And geography cannot be bought. You can't just fast-track a defense budget and suddenly purchase an island chain perfectly positioned over the world's most critical trade route.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
But having the geography is only step one. Converting that innate advantage into a sustainable capability requires immense, consistent investment.
Right.
It means continuously upgrading the runways on the Andaman Islands, investing in anti-submarine warfare, and deepening diplomatic ties with nations like Japan, Australia, and the U.S.
Okay, let's ground all this high-level strategy into a realistic scenario, because it is very easy to view these dynamics as just a localized Asian chess match. But how does this abstract idea of deterrence and maritime awareness play out during an actual crisis?
Okay.
Let's look at a hypothetical Taiwan scenario.
That's a good one.
Go for it.
Imagine a major military escalation around Taiwan. The United States mobilizes its Pacific Fleet. China heavily militarizes the South China Sea. Japan and Australia are pulled into regional operation.
Right.
Suddenly, the waters immediately east of the Malacca Strait become a highly contested active conflict zone.
And the immediate instinct for someone living in, say, Europe or South America is to think, well, that's terrible, but it's happening on the other side of the world. Why does it affect me?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it hits every corner of the globe within days.
Really?
Because of the insurance markets.
Oh, of course.
The moment a body of water is designated as a conflict zone by entities like the Joint War Committee in London, marine insurance premiums skyrocket. Commercial shipping companies face a stark choice. They either pay astronomical war risk premiums that completely wipe out their profit margins, or they refuse to sail through that area.
Meaning ships are forced to reroute. So if the South China Sea is too dangerous and the Malacca Strait feeds right into it, those massive supertankers have to swing way south, navigating through those Sunda or Lombok Straits in Indonesia and looping out into the Philippine Sea.
And rerouting adds weeks to the journey. It burns exponentially more fuel. It throws off the highly calibrated just-in-time logistics networks that the entire global economy relies on.
Right, because everything is timed perfectly.
Exactly. Suddenly, there's a shortage of shipping containers.
Yeah.
Energy prices spike because oil isn't arriving on schedule. The supply chain for everything from semiconductors to basic agricultural goods cascades into failure.
And sitting right in the middle of this chaos is India.
Yes. In that scenario, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands become India's primary tool. New Delhi is suddenly faced with a monumental task, preventing a Pacific conflict from spilling over and destabilizing the Indian Ocean while simultaneously protecting its own vital commercial trade.
So their situational awareness from those islands becomes the most valuable currency in the region.
Oh, absolutely. They are the eyes and ears tracking any Chinese naval assets trying to move west through the straits or Allied forces moving east. India has to decide in real time how closely to integrate with partners like the U.S. or the Quad, balancing that cooperation with its own strategic autonomy.
The Taiwan scenario perfectly illustrates that the Indo-Pacific isn't just a collection of isolated zones. It is a deeply interconnected circulatory system. The energy routes from the Middle East to Asia, the trade routes from Southeast Asia to Europe, they are fundamentally linked.
Which explains why the rhetoric from major powers is always focused on a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Yeah, it sounds like diplomatic fluff.
It does. But it's actually a desperate acknowledgement that if this specific circulatory system gets blocked, the global economy suffers a massive heart attack.
And I guess it also explains why China is scrambling to build naval bases in places like Djibouti or exploring ports in Pakistan. They are desperately trying to secure their lifeline across an ocean they don't geographically control.
Everyone involved is operating under the same fundamental realization. The future balance of global power will not be decided solely by massive land armies moving borders. It is going to be decided by who can secure, monitor, and influence the maritime commons.
Which brings us to kind of the core synthesis of this deep dive. The major takeaway here from our sources is that a nation does not need to achieve total dominance over the world's oceans to be a major maritime power.
Right. India does not control the Malacca Strait, nor can they flip a switch and shut down global trade.
Yeah.
But their forward position near the eastern gateway of the Indian Ocean provides them with a level of strategic leverage that outpunches their sheer fleet size.
The ultimate advantage is deeply understanding your own geography and building the precise technological and diplomatic capabilities to exploit it. It's a shift from the old mindset of naval supremacy, where you just build more ships than the other guy, to a mindset of domain awareness.
Power is no longer just about projection. It is about presence and clarity. If you can see the board better than your opponent, you don't necessarily need more pieces.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone listening with a final thought to mull over. Because our sources pointed out that China is acutely aware of everything we just discussed.
Oh yeah, they know.
They know they have a Malacca dilemma, and they know India holds a commanding position over that specific hallway. Because of this, Beijing is pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into alternative overland infrastructure.
Right. Like massive pipelines running through Myanmar, rail networks stretching across Central Asia and Russia, and the economic corridor through Pakistan.
Yeah, they are actively trying to bypass the maritime choke point entirely. So think about this. If the maritime choke points become too closely monitored, and the naval presence of the U.S., India, and their allies becomes too suffocating for China, could we witness a massive, unprecedented pivot away from the oceans?
That's a huge question.
Right. For centuries, sea power has been the absolute metric of global dominance. But what happens to the concept of sea power if the world's emerging superpower simply decides to build a road around the ocean?
Yeah.
If the hallway in our mansion is guarded by someone with a radar gun, do you fight them for it? Or do you just spend $1 trillion to knock down a wall and build a brand new door? It is a fundamental question about the future of global trade.
A shift toward transcontinental land roads would upend the naval doctrines we've relied on since the era of galleons. It really forces us to reconsider the entire board.
It really does. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the geopolitics of the Malacca Strait. We've mapped out the choke points, dissected the mechanics of a blockade, and explored how a few islands can shift the balance of power. Until next time, keep questioning the map, look past the borders, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard podcast. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh podcasts every Monday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Podcast. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.